my first question is, how did Portable get involved with this SDNOW breakout session?
Yeah, so we have had a good relationship with the people that run SDNOW, and we did pitch some ideas for running some breakout sessions to them. They invited us to run a breakout session within the capable business stream of the conference. There was multiple streams that people could be involved in, and as such we were invited to, I guess, tackle some of the tensions that exist around design capability within business and how to, I guess, remedy some of the issues that occur in that space around design potentially being seen as theatre, around the fact that it's hard to measure, and how we might evolve our capabilities as a result and bring about more capable businesses.
And have you been part of any SDNOW programs in the past as a designer yourself?
I was attending SDNOW as my first conference that Service Design Now runs, so it was a really cool experience to see the spread and breadth of the thinking that's going on in this space. And also I think it's worth acknowledging that the organisers did a really great job of creating a very inclusive and very diverse speaking body for the workshops and for the sessions that were run. And I think it just goes to show the weight of ethical responsibility that we all feel as designers, and they exercised that really well and embodied it really well throughout the conference.
And so you're a designer yourself. Have you had any experience with things getting lost in translation between business and design?
Yeah, I think a lot of us who've worked in large organisations as designers can often come up against the barriers of either executive leadership, knowing the terminology without knowing the depth behind the terminology, or potentially painting things with a certain brush to make them seem more desirable. So I've seen design fall victim to that. I've seen agile fall victim to that. I've seen other concepts and other sort of trends fall victim to that. And any trend that's current in the current world, you can often look to an example in business of it being a little bit abused. I think some of the things we can do to remedy that, and some of the ways that I've had experience remedying that, is that oftentimes a lot of these things that we do as designers, as developers, as producers in the world, they can seem like risky tasks for those that are on the outside not understanding, but in fact most of what we do is risk mitigation and risk alleviation. If you understand your users, if you work in a way that delivers small chunks of value over time, and you can then analyse how that value is being delivered and pivot your course as needed, if you can test everything with the people that you're designing for, you're literally removing the risks of releasing something that no one's going to use. So I think once that gets to be understood in the conversation, all the better for our industry and the broader business sector.
The title of the breakout session that Portable ran was Lost in Translation, Learning the Language of Business. Could you give me a bit of an idea of how you ran this session and what your goal was?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people came to the session with this framing that was given by the conference, expecting that there might be an antagonistic mindset to the concept that there's a design area and there's a business area and there's a divide between them. But we worked hard to make sure that that wasn't the case and that there was a collaborative mindset for it. And I was drilling into people a lot at the start, at the end, and since when talking about the session, that language becomes the culture you inhabit. So I think that's a really strong thing to consider as designers in the world and as business people in the world, that what you say becomes the things that people do, and the way you talk about what you do becomes the way that people view what you do. So I think with that at the core, we made sure that we created a safe space for conversation to occur, to be really intentional about our use of language, even things like starting with our acknowledgement of country. I think being really intentional in the language we used there, and then all the way through the workshop reminding people to encourage others to contribute their opinions and thoughts, to suspend judgment, and to make a safe space for people to have the conversations they needed to have. And so then we ended up, I guess, analysing everything that was out there that was causing the most confusion and the things that were highest priority about those confusions. And then we adopted a playful approach to creating some analogies that could be used instead of those terms, or to explain those terms with greater depth that has now become a living document for people to use after the session that we designed in the week following.
Nice. And in terms of being a facilitator of this workshop, and there are a couple of other people involved at Portable as well, I know you guys thought about this beforehand. Was there anything that you took into consideration in terms of helping the session run well for you and for the people participating to be comfortable and get valuable insights?
Yeah, so this session's like any other session we run for our clients and the people we're designing with and for. We certainly took an iterative approach. There were many discussions. We collaborated with a lot of the different designers that work here, those that know the SDNOW content and those that didn't, those that have experience in business and those that didn't. And we gathered a lot of perspectives, a lot of ideas about what we could run. As with any sort of activity, we started with the broader goal that we needed, and we got that right first, and then the activities naturally could fall out of that. And yeah, there's even some doubts along the way. The eventuating activities that we ran, they were ones that I thought I might need to change, but in bouncing that from off other designers here, I realised that it was going to meet the goal and do it quite well. So I think collaboration was key, and I think also being open-minded enough that you can critique the initial ideas and then make sure that it always comes back to a goal, I think was a really strong thing that we all did together. And then making sure that there was a takeaway. I think it's really important to honour people's time in these things and making sure that they can actually take the lessons or take the things that are discussed away with them instead of it being just a moment in time that they may forget later on down the track.
Can you tell me about any activity in particular, maybe one that you ran at the event? Yeah,
so I think our portable approach is often to be really flexible about the tools we use. So we're not too rigid or purist about any of the approaches. And often that leads to us inventing new framings for the way we run an activity. So the final activity that we ran before developing the outputs of the workshop was something we invented on a 2x2 where confusability was one of the indexes and frequency of use was the other, and it allowed us to map from both the business worlds and the design worlds and then collaborate back and forth which ones were the highest confused terms and which ones were the most frequently used terms, and anything that scored highly on both matrices, both indices ended up being the things that we focused on by the end of the workshop. So that was a pretty cool tool that I think we'll probably use again whenever language is a real crucial goal of any of the projects we're working on.
So the workshop that you ran, does that have any crossover with any of the projects that Portable works on in our office?
Yeah, I think language is key to so many of our projects, and I think if I were to think of examples, working with government is a really big one for us because getting that balance right in the language used internally in government organisations and then for the public and for the people they're designing for, I think being able to be the mediator in between that can translate language and not just words but visual language as well, and meaning and the strategies that sit behind things. I think about government work a lot in that space, and I'm sure our legal designers would also have a lot to say about the importance of language in our legal products that we're currently building and releasing at the moment. But I think in general, language is important to everything we do, and really adopting that idea that the language you use becomes the culture you inhabit. It's really strong, and you've got to be really mindful whenever you're having conversations with people, whether they're participants, clients, colleagues. I think it's a really important thing to keep abreast of.
And if someone is interested in this subject, this intersection between business and design, aside from our findings from this session, which we're going to make available, do you have any recommendations for anything else they could look into this aspect from?
Yeah, so we did a thing at the beginning of the workshop which almost resembles a bit of a lightning talk where you make the space for about 10 to 15 minutes to really provide some inspiration and framing for people. So for anyone who's interested in this intersection of design and business, I'd recommend checking out the McKinsey Design Index, which allows people to understand the business value of design. InVision have also done a really great report around design maturity and what that looks like in businesses. I'd also check out the This Is HCD podcast. There's a lot of really great discussions going on there around the value of design in business as well. And if anyone's looking for some inspirational content around language in particular, there's a really inspiring Nike video. I can't really pronounce the name of it. It was born out of Japan, and it basically takes on some rigid and well-established ideas of language being used to put people down and turns it on its head over the course of an ad. So I'd really recommend you Google something along the lines of Nike Japan phrases.
I'm sure I can find it and put it in a link.
Cool.